Take two. Andrea Koppel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And it's a pleasure to see you, my friend. Let's get started. So you're the host and producer of something called Time4Coffee Podcast, and you're also the founder of College2Career Academy. And I was wondering if you would describe the podcast and the academy and your mission for driving their success.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. So Time4Coffee is shorthand for, do you have time to grab a cup of coffee with me so I can ask you about your job and or your career? The message that we send people who we're interested in connecting with. And what inspired this podcast and my mission is my desire to level the playing field for those students whose parents are not connected, who don't come from families in industries that interest various young people, and even for those who perhaps are at schools where their alumni network is not terribly robust. And I wanted to bring the professionals to them. So I do, in essence, informational interviews with guests in dozens of different industries in which we talk about what they do in their day job, what their industry is like, sometimes what their company is all about, and then we get into their career trajectory, how they got where they are now, what they majored in college, if they had any clue what they wanted to do when they graduated. And P.S., about 90% of the over 300 guests I've interviewed over the last several years had no clue what they wanted to do. So that the mission of Time4Coffee is to empower 1 million college and university students to turn their degrees into careers with an S that they will love. The mission of the College2Career Academy is similar, very much aligned with that, but it allows me to work either one-on-one with students who want to hire me as their coach, in particular, confused college students, those who have no clue what they want to do when they graduate, or after they graduate, they don't know where to start. So I help them break the mental logjam and help them see all the possibilities that await them out there. And then I teach them the tools, the tactics, and the modern job searching strategies to help them land those jobs. So that's what I do. And just in the way that this latest phase of my career has unfolded, Dan, you can see that the Time4Coffee podcast and what I learned from doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these interviews informed my decision to become a coach for confused college students and recent grads. It's an evolution, which is a very small example of what happens to most of us, how our careers unfold. And you and I were chatting before we pressed play here and started recording about how your career unfolded. So much of it is iterative and one step after another, and you really don't know where it's going to take you, which I find unbelievably exciting.
So I wrote this script for this podcast episode, and I want to throw it all out now because you've completely rewired my brain. So for those who are listening and saying, how do I know the name Andrea Koppel? Or they're watching a segment on YouTube and they're looking at your face and saying, gee, she looks really familiar. So let's a little bit of history. You were a CNN foreign correspondent for several years, and then you got out of CNN and you had a career in corporate communications, correct? In the nonprofit sector. Is that correct?
Yes. Actually, I was a foreign correspondent and I was the State Department correspondent, diplomatic correspondent, and I covered Capitol Hill. But before that, I was a local television and local radio reporter. Then I moved into cause-oriented public relations, which basically means the company, the boutique company that I worked for was hired by nonprofits and foundations predominantly to help them with a whole series of things. And I headed the communications team. And then I moved from that into the nonprofit world.
Right.
And my last job before I quit was heading up global affairs and public policy for a global nonprofit.
Okay. So you've had a multi-chapter career story like I have. I started in radio, as I mentioned to you, got into advertising, was in that for a long time, spent 20 years in recruiting, and then blew that thing up. And now I'm a future of work Sherpa, which is a term I kind of gave myself, where I help others get up the mountain, the career mountain, right? Now, I mention all that about you because that informs the power, right, of what you are doing. You probably, young Andrea probably thought, I'm headed in this direction. I'm not thinking about what seasoned Andrea is going to be doing because my brain can't wrap around that, right? But I think that gives you a certain authority in this process of saying, listen, I started off doing this and I've had this wonderful ride, and you're going to have careers, plural, like you said. So how does that all come to play? How do you leverage your own story and your own storytelling to make this magic work for people getting into entry-level careers out of college?
So that's a great question. And what I'd like to start by saying is that, yes, I've had a multi-chapter career professional journey, but that's not all that I'm drawing from. I have the benefit of having interviewed several hundred other professionals and heard their stories, and of course prepared for all of those interviews. So I was studying their resumes, their LinkedIn profiles. And what I now have is a really robust data set that has informed my coaching. And that is why one of the biggest challenges that I help my young students with, those who are confused and anxious and stuck, is I help them get unstuck. And the reason that is, Dan, that they are stuck is that for 4 years of university, or 5, depending upon what plan they were on, they have been put into a silo. They've been identified as X, Y, or Z major. You're a communications major. You're a history major. You're an English major or a marketing major. And so they have, figuratively, blindfolds on. And understandably, they think in a linear way. They think, I'm an English major, I know how to write, so I can become a writer, or I could become a teacher. I'm a marketing major, so I can go to work for a marketing company. But what they don't realize, and what I help them see, is that their major is not the tiny house, and I'm making a little house-shaped figure over my head. It's not the tiny house that they're going to be forced to live in for the rest of their lives. And instead, it is the foundation of a professional skyscraper
Mm-hmm.
that they will be building over the course of their professional life,
Right.
with each new job and each new career adding a new floor in this skyscraper. Their major has equipped them with certain hard skills, technical skills, and soft skills, interpersonal skills. And it isn't just their major.
Right.
It's their extracurricular activities, it's their hobbies, their volunteer work, the part-time or maybe even full-time job that they worked through school or in high school. So all of these experiences, these are incredibly rich experiences that make that foundation. And then their interests, the extracurriculars, the hobbies, what they spend their free time doing,
Right.
are the clues that they should follow into different industries.
I think young people go into the career search with very hard eyes. They're laser focused, right? And soft eyes and ears would actually help us more. I mean, I briefly told you about growing up in suburban Washington, D.C., and I was involved in journalism. I thought I was going to be a journalist, right? And something crazy happened in my senior year. My apropos to nothing, my teacher lived along the Potomac River, my geology teacher, and he knew I was involved in the school paper. I was the school paper's editor at the time. And he came to me and he said, I need your help with something. I don't know, what am I going to do? You know, I'm 17 years old. What do I know? And he told me a story. He said, so you're involved in the paper. Maybe you could talk to the congressman about something. I don't understand. What is your problem? So here's the problem, Andrea. Lived along the Potomac next to a trap rock mining company that was dumping asbestos-laden rock into the Potomac River. Okay, I thought about it a second. I said, wait a minute. That's where we get our drinking water from Montgomery County and from Washington, D.C. There's a problem here. Now I understand what he's doing. Make a long story short, I had previously interviewed our then congressman, a gentleman by the name of Newton Steers. He was a Republican, one-term congressman, but he was still in that first term. And I went to him with this problem. I said, you know, I got this teacher here and he's complaining, but they stopped it. The congressman actually, because of my intervention, stopped it. And I mention this to you because I had kind of shelved that environmental mega story of my life until many years later, when in the aughts, I got involved in politics, and in local politics, many of us were getting involved in environmental issues. And I tapped that part of my narrative from many, many years ago, and it redirected my career. I turned my recruiting company, which was focused on business development and marketing people, into something that was green and involved in sustainability and corporate social responsibility. I actually changed my brand. I bring all this up because we all have these experiences. Some of them feel far afield, and some of these are actually quite meaningful, even if they happened, in my particular case, many years prior. How do you feel about that?
Oh, 100%. And that's why I say to any young person who is listening to this podcast, anybody who may be even farther along in their career, that you have and will be honing so many transferable skills. You are not wedded to one industry. And as your interests evolve, as your life priorities evolve, you can pivot, you can zig and zag. And it is all about having the wherewithal, the knowledge to tell your story in a way that resonates with that employer, because not all employers, unfortunately, have a growth mindset, have the same expansive mindset. And I experienced this when I left journalism and moved into public relations. And then when I moved into the nonprofit world, I found myself in sales. I was selling myself to them. I was helping them to see how the experiences and the skill sets that I had honed were in fact going to align with their needs and would actually help them more so than somebody maybe who had come out of a traditional background of public relations or the nonprofit space.
You know, when in my years of recruiting, I would have senior management come to me. Oh God, I hated these people. I loved them, but I hated them. Dan, find me somebody who comes out of Ivy League, you know, not one of those crummy Ivy League schools, but, you know, Harvard, Yale, or, you know, and they have this, this pedigree, and yeah, you know, Wharton School, that would be great, right? And you'd find them these people and they would flame out. I bring this up because one of the best recruits I ever placed came out of a liberal arts college with a philosophy degree. He knew how to think.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And in fact, I had a client recently who had wanted to major in psychology in school, and their father insisted that they major in marketing.
Right.
And I told this person, admittedly 4 years too late, that in fact a psychology degree would have teed them up for an incredible profession in marketing. Sometimes studying whatever that industry is not the best pathway forward. But the bottom line is to study what interests you, not what you think is going to get you the job when you graduate. Because think about it, Dan, just as you said, liberal arts major, philosophy. If we were thinking in a linear way, you'd say, well, I guess you're going to be a professor, or I guess you're going to be a teacher somewhere, or you'll be a writer if you're lucky, who can kind of sort of make a living. You wouldn't think, wow, you know critical thinking. You're somebody who is able to get into research and pull out the most important information. Maybe you have some digital analysis, analytical skills. So there's so much that can be done with pretty much any major that you have, including, can I throw one more story out there?
Oh, I love stories.
Because this is, I think, probably considered to be one of the most useless majors out there. The woman, her name is Emily Fletcher, and she majored in musical theater. All right.
Okay,
now, I
I'm
don't
laughing.
know about you,
I'm
Dan.
laughing. My wife is a BFA in drama, and she never
There you
used any
go.
of it.
Well, but okay, I want to get more into her story. But Emily, her dream was to be a showgirl on Broadway.
Oh boy.
And in her 20s, she made it. She was on Broadway. And by her mid-20s, she was going gray prematurely from the stress of having to be on top of 6 different parts and not knowing from 1 minute to the next which role you were going to be called to play. So it was incredibly stressful. And there was another actor who seemed super zen. And Emily asked her where she got her composure from. And this woman said, oh, meditation. Emily ended up leaving Broadway, going to India, studying meditation for several years in India, studying the Vedas, came back to the US, and is today a multiple 7-figure entrepreneur who teaches meditation online And Emily's gifts and her talents and her skills of holding an audience's attention and her ability to cut through. She can analyze scripts, right? She's able to get into character, and she had to read all kinds of literature as a musical theater major. But Emily is the most extraordinary teacher. I've interviewed her on Time for Coffee, and I myself, before I interviewed, took her meditation course, and she was the first one, Dan, who was able to break through with me and help me to actually meditate. So that is why I say study what interests you.
Right. Yeah, my wife, she had got a degree in drama and thought that was going to be her, the semester before I met her, she was at the Eugene O'Neill Institute writing plays. So her parents thought, okay, she's going to be David Mamet or something. And it didn't work out. And then she met me, and, our careers went in a different direction. She now has a multifaceted work life. She teaches gifted kids in a public school. And boy, that drama background really comes into play with all those different personalities, right? So you have to leverage all that emotional intelligence with very high functioning children, right? And so she's gotten very good at running side hustles. We sell vintage clothing and jewelry and
Wow.
so the point being, the degree that you had won't necessarily translate into immediate career success or career success at all, but there's going to be aspects of it that are going to be pure magic, as they were for my wife.
Okay. Can I pick up on that?
You run with it.
Because in my course, one of the courses that I teach in the College2Career Academy, I talk about the 4 M's, and this is a framework that you can use to help kind of narrow the field for yourself in terms of the type of industries and then the type of companies or organizations that would be a good fit for you. And I have 2 final M's that come at the end of the course, one of which is the importance of your mindset, to have and try to embody and cultivate a growth mindset throughout your professional life and your personal life. And what I mean by that is, see your fails, your flub ups, the times that you fall down on your face as opportunities to learn, because that is exactly what they are. And they are sometimes more valuable to go through than your big successes. And then the last M is magic. And this is what I mean by that. Only concentrate on what you want to do, especially new grads, for that first year or so after you graduate. And why do I say that? Because you will have magical experiences. Some of it could be black magic, right, like the pandemic. These really awful things that come out of nowhere. In the case of the pandemic, it affected all of us, which is highly unusual. But you'll have things happen that change the landscape for you. All those young people who graduated or were graduating in 2020, who had their job offers rescinded, their internships rescinded, all of that, curveball, black magic. But you will also have fairy dust magic happen. You will have people who come into your life out of nowhere, maybe a friend of a friend or a stranger that you meet, somebody on LinkedIn, or you will have a magical experience where you learn about something that you didn't know about before, or you're exposed to something you hadn't been exposed to before. And these experiences will change your next step. So be open. Don't worry about what's going to happen after that first step. Be there fully and be open to all the potential magical encounters that you'll have.
Okay, but now I'm going to throw a something
A
into
wrench?
a wrench into the wheel. I don't know, a mixed metaphor.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you can imagine, and you are fully aware of some of your clients who were like, Andrea, I'm spending, I'm investing 30, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 a year to get my degree. And mom and dad are like, the clock is ticking and you better get a good job because you're going to be paying that student loan. And that really is shitty. I'm sorry. That is terrible that we have gotten to the point. My brother went to Cornell many years ago. He didn't go bankrupt. And yet my own college, full pop, is 70 plus a year. That's insane. Now it's forcing people like me. My daughter doesn't go to a school like that. She goes to VCU. It's a state school for me because I live in Virginia, and she's getting a great education. But I bring up the money because there's an ROI aspect to college that really sucks, right? And it's a disservice to that same point. Go like that person said, go get the marketing degree because at least you'll get into a good career track. That's not guaranteed. And I think the biggest thing you're probably dealing with is the palpable stress that these young folks are dealing with because one, they don't want to make a mistake. That's the first funny thing, right? You're going to make a lot of mistakes. I've got to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. I can't pivot. I got to stay laser focused. Oh boy, you're going to pivot a few times. If I had to talk to old me from 40 years ago, I think his head would explode out of the circuitous career path that I've taken, and probably you have as well. So how do we get beyond that to a place of joy? Because those first years in work, I mean, my first couple of years, working in DC were joyful. They were absolutely joyful because I changed the narrative around it being perfect to being, well, okay, I've got this opportunity. What do I do with it? And I did.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. For so many, too many young people who are graduating these days, they are saddled with an extraordinary amount of debt. Yeah. And they have to be realistic about what kind of job they can afford to take, right? What that salary is going to be because they have this banknote, this loan that they have to pay off. But that doesn't change the fact that you can really only plan for about a year in advance, if that. And there are so many young people I know, and I bet you know too, Dan, who followed the dollars into Wall Street and are working or were working night and day, earning an amazing salary, and were miserable, so miserable. So the question
you're looking at the poster child for that.
There
right?
You go. There you go. So one of the frames that I work with my clients is around money, because that is the reality. You have to earn, they have to earn a certain salary in order to be able to pay off their bank loans. But once you figure out the minimum that you need to earn, that gives you a pretty good then jumping off point to find different industries that might light you up with the skill sets that you have. So you're not locked in to necessarily a Wall Street job or a job that's going to be soul sucking.
Right.
And I think that, as again, going back to magic, the black magic can happen. Just because you have that great job that may be paying your bills and putting additional money into your bank account doesn't mean that that company won't be hit by some economic downturn where they're having then to lay people off. And it may not be pandemic related, it could be related to supply chains. There are all different factors out there. So focus on what you can control. And that is where you decide to take that first step. And to your point, Dan, I agree 100%. Don't worry about making a mistake. I would frame it this way. You can't make a mistake with your first several jobs out of school. I actually don't believe you can ever really make a mistake at any point in your career. Even like with me, where I went from journalism into public relations, and I let my ego get in the way. I took a job that was way beyond my experience level. Remember, I had no background in PR, which the people at this company knew, but I had never managed people before. That's a big factor. I was a senior vice president, head of communications, managing a team then of 5 at the time. But I had never managed people before, so I didn't know how to run a meeting. I didn't know the inside processes of engaging in strategic communications or messaging or any of this. I had to learn it all on the job. And a year and 9 months after I was hired as a senior vice president, I was fired. And I used to be really embarrassed. I used to be really ashamed. And the truth is, Dan, I am not anymore. And you know why? You know why? Because I had the courage and the chutzpah, if you know any Yiddish, to go in at a very high level. And I got paid a really good salary to learn public relations. I didn't have to pay for a master's in PR. I got paid to learn it on the job. So even though it was humiliating, it was certainly gut-wrenching and challenging and all of those things, I had to quickly find my next job, which I did, and move into that next job and use it as a stepping stone. But I learned so much, and I have zero regrets about having taken that job that I was fired from.
You're reminding me of me when I was 28 years old and a top executive in an elite marketing communications agency, where somebody said to me, you know, Dan, your roll up is 12.5% of all the billings in this company. And I soon afterwards had a panic attack because I was getting paid a lot of money, had a beautiful office with a view of a waterfall and all that. And I was way above my abilities, but I got the great job. And then in 93, on my birthday, I got let go. And boy, to want to talk about grief and all those things you just mentioned, the embarrassment, how could people look at me and so forth and so on. Now, I look back at that and I say, boy, what a gift. I got through that.
Exactly.
I got through that. And so it brings me to the next point, which is we've got a really crazy notion of success in this country, which is wrapped in generations of American dream mythology, right? And from living across the globe that you don't ask a person who's not an American what they do for a living, because you don't ask them what they do for a living because it's rude. You ask them about their children. I learned this many years ago in Europe on a trip, and the tour guide said, don't Don't do it. Don't do what George is doing. It's very rude. And the reason is because I think people outside of America have a more centered view of life, which is, go have some wine on the veranda with me. Let's just relax and look at the vista, and let's enjoy life. And tell me about your kids, and what's a good day for you. I love that. But coming out of college, it was like, okay, people are going to judge me based on how young I am versus how successful I am. And that didn't work out, but it was the greatest gift. And I think it brings me to my next point, which is, I think we as thought leaders have a responsibility to get people beyond that it's all or nothing career focus, because it doesn't bring happiness. It may bring remuneration, right? But it doesn't bring happiness. At the end of each day that I would drive the 40 miles from Greenwich, Connecticut back to my home near New Haven every day, and get home and be flop sweating and miserable and just want to crawl into bed. Was I a success? I don't know. I was miserable. And you know what? That all those things that happened to me back then, to this day, inform the thought leadership that I bring to others today. And I think you probably can say the same thing, right?
Oh, completely. Absolutely. And that's another reason why when I talk about the 4M framework that I work through with my clients, money is one of them, but the other one is mission and your values.
Yeah, your mission.
And the third M is for mobility. And by that, I mean, what kind of job do you want to have? Do you want to have one where you're sitting down, staring at a computer? Do you want to be traveling for your job? Like for me, I was all about adventure. I loved traveling overseas and domestically, and as a local reporter, just running around all day. I found that very exhilarating. And the other part of mobility is the company or organization where you're joining, one that's going to invest in you with professional development.
Right.
Is there potential for upward mobility, so that we can think about their life? To your excellent point, in this country, in the United States, we live to work.
Right.
Whereas in Europe and many other much wiser cultures,
yes,
they work to live.
And we got to learn that lesson.
And this generation, Dan, the Gen Zers, and I would say the tail end of the millennial generation, have seen that, which is why you have, if you go on Upwork, which is one of those you can hire a freelancer platforms, they have done surveys and put out reports showing the number of freelancers or gig economy people has been growing year on year, because these are people who are saying, it is not enough for me to get 2 weeks off a year or 3 weeks off a year, or to have to clock in at 9, work until 5, or 9 to 6, or work weekends and this. I want control over my own life. And so I would say to those young people also, Dan has a huge amount of experience, and he's given a lot of deep thought into how he can advise his clients. There are many coaches who have done the same thing. With all due respect to the parents who are listening out there, who are not coaches, the reason that you should not be the one advising your child what they should do is multifold. But one of the reasons being, whether you are aware of this or not, are going to end up allowing your fear and your anxiety about your child's future to inform the advice that you give them.
Right.
You are also informing your own decision based on your experience. Your experience. This is their life. They need to follow their gut, their interests. And if you're going to interfere with that and try to push them in one direction or another, you may be setting them up for many, many years of unhappiness.
That's right.
Trust your child. Trust them. Will they make mistakes? Probably. But both Dan and I have made, I can speak, well, I should just speak for myself. I've made many mistakes that I relish today.
Yeah.
I relish them. That is how we learn. And I'll just give one final metaphor.
Right.
I tell the young people I coach that rather than thinking about their career as being a recipe that is written on a piece of paper or that they find on allrecipes.com and they're getting the ingredients out of their refrigerator, out of their cupboard, and let's say they're going to make a lasagna career and they layer all the cheeses and the meat and the pasta in the pan, put it in the oven at 375, take it out 45 minutes later, and there is their perfect career that they have followed the recipes to with a crispy crust. Instead, think about your career as if you are a mad scientist.
Oh, I love that.
In a laboratory with test tubes, with those funny goggles, with the Bunsen burner, and maybe even one of the beakers. And what does a mad scientist do? She puts different chemicals, different ingredients in the test tubes, in the Bunsen burner, and sometimes it blows up in her face.
Yeah, but it's what blows up that you analyze and say, whoa, wait, this looks interesting.
Yes, but just like a mad scientist who is trying to find that right formula, you are a unique formula. And therefore, the way that you find the right fit for you is by you doing it, you trying it, you experimenting with different jobs in different industries, you falling down and picking yourself up and iterating and experimenting. And that is how you find your passion and your purpose. And if I'm an example, and there are many others, you will have multiple passions. Multiple passions. In a million years, as a poli-sci major studying Asian studies and Chinese language, never, ever, ever thought I would be a career coach one day.
Yeah, but you want to know something, Andrea Koppel? You're doing the work of your dreams right now. I am so in awe of you, and I want to bring you back on this podcast because there's a zillion questions I need to ask you, and we'll do that in good time. Before we depart, could you point our listeners to your social media so that they can learn more about you and subscribe to your podcast?
Absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. So the Time4Coffee podcast, you can find at time4coffee.org. And you can also find my coaching tab there if you want to sign up for a free discovery call with me. I would also invite you to follow me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel. I post pretty much every day. I post new content, whether it's videos or written content, to give you tips, insights, advice on how to build, discover both a career you'll love and how to find jobs So I would invite you to follow me there. That would probably be the best place.
Well, I encourage them to follow you and to get on LinkedIn. That's really the most important channel right now. And it's so effective. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Dan. This was so much fun.